I'm Elise Rowan, 36, an Air Force officer who built her career from ROTC to a command track by learning to stay steady under pressure. For years, I was the one holding my family together, especially my sister, with money, time, and support she never had to ask for. But at her wedding, when she sat me near the bathrooms and told me to stay out of the photos because I didn't fit in, something in me shifted. Have you ever been dismissed or embarrassed by someone you'd gone out of your way to show up for? If you have, share it in the comments. You're definitely not the only one. Before I get into how everything unfolded, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever had to draw a line after being pushed too far, tap like and subscribe for more real stories about boundaries, respect, and taking your power back. What happened after that moment might not be what you expect. I was 23 when I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Air Force, standing in my blues at the ceremony while my older sister Lila sat in the back row, filing her nails. She showed up late, left early, and when I asked her about it later, she said she had a date. That was Lila. Always somewhere else, always needing something, always assuming I'd understand. Our parents divorced when I was 12 and she was 14. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital, and Dad moved 3 states away with a woman he met at a conference. The house became mine to manage, not officially, but in all the ways that mattered. I made sure Lila got to school. I helped her with algebra homework she never bothered to learn. I covered for her when she snuck out, lied to Mom about where she'd been, came home smelling like beer and bad decisions. She was the social one, the pretty one, the one boys called and girls envied. I was the one who ran cross-country at 5 in the morning, studied late, applied for ROTC scholarships because we couldn't afford college otherwise. Mom said I was her rock. Lila said I was boring. I loved her anyway. By the time I made first lieutenant, Lila had dropped out of community college twice. She was working retail, living in an apartment she couldn't afford, dating a guy who borrowed money from her that he never paid back. I sent her $500 for rent, then another $300 for a car repair, then $800 for a deposit on a new place when the first lease fell through. She always said thank you. She always said she'd pay me back. She never did. I told myself it was fine. Family helps family. She'd find her footing eventually. When I made captain at 29, she posted about it on social media with a picture of us from high school. The caption said, "So proud of my little sis," with 3 heart emojis. She didn't call, didn't text privately. Just the public performance of pride, the kind that got likes and comments. I saw it while I was deployed, sitting in a dusty operations tent in Afghanistan, and I felt something twist in my chest that I didn't have a name for yet. Lila started dating men who wore expensive watches and talked about investments. She joined a gym that cost more per month than my car payment. She posted photos at rooftop bars, wine tastings, charity galas where the tickets cost more than she made in a week. I didn't ask who was paying. I didn't want to know. She stopped calling me for advice. Stopped asking for money, which should have been a relief, but somehow felt like another kind of distance. When we talked, she'd mention brunch plans, yoga retreats, someone's lake house. She'd ask about my deployments in the same tone people ask about the weather, polite, distracted, already thinking about the next thing. Then she met Daniel. She called me at 2200 hours on a Tuesday. I was in my office on base, finishing reports, and her voice came through bright and breathless in a way I hadn't heard in years. "I met someone," she said. "Elise, he's perfect." Daniel Hart was 36, a financial consultant with a corner office and a family name that opened doors. His father was a retired Army Major General. His mother sat on charity boards and planned fundraisers where people paid $1,000 a plate. Lila talked about him the way people talk about winning the lottery. "His family is amazing," she said during one of our calls. "They have this house in the Hamptons. His mom is so elegant. They're very traditional, very classy. I think they really like me." I asked if she'd told them about me. There was a pause. "Of course," she said. I mentioned you." She didn't sound convincing. The engagement happened 6 months later. She sent me a photo of the ring, an emerald-cut diamond that probably cost more than my annual salary. I congratulated her. I asked about the wedding. She said they were planning something intimate, elegant, very curated. Curated. That word started appearing in every conversation. The guest list was curated. The venue was curated. The aesthetic was curated. I began to understand that curated meant controlled, and control meant keeping certain things, certain people, at a comfortable distance. She didn't ask me to be a bridesmaid. I found out through her best friend Jenna, who called me 2 months before the wedding, apologetic and awkward. "I thought you should know," Jenna said. "Lila's really stressed about the in-laws. She wants everything to be perfect." "I understand," I said, even though I didn't. "She's worried about the aesthetic," Jenna continued, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. "The photos, the colors, I don't know. She's in her head about it." I thanked Jenna and hung up. I sat in my quiet base housing living room, still in my flight suit from the day's training exercises, and stared at the photo of Lila and me from childhood that I kept on the bookshelf. We were smiling, arms around each other, gap-toothed and sunburned from a day at the pool. I couldn't remember the last time she'd looked at me like that, like I was someone she wanted close. The next time we spoke, she mentioned the seating chart. "We're still figuring it out," she said. "Daniel's family has a lot of people to accommodate. It's complicated." "Where are you putting me?" I asked. Another pause. "We're working on it." I wanted to ask if I was the complication, if my uniform and my rank and my life were the things that didn't fit her curated vision. But I didn't. I told myself I was reading too much into it, that she was just stressed, that weddings made people irrational. I told myself a lot of things that weren't true. 2 weeks before the wedding, she called again. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way it got when she was about to ask for something she knew I wouldn't like. "I need to talk to you about something," she said. I waited. "The uniform," she said. "I know you usually wear it to formal events, but for the wedding, would you consider wearing a dress instead?" I looked down at the blues hanging in my closet, the ribbons and badges I'd earned through deployments and training and years of service. "Why?" I asked. "It's just, Daniel's dad is retired military, and I don't want it to seem like we're trying to draw attention or compete or... I don't know. It might be a lot." "Lila, I'm not trying to compete with anyone." "I know. I just think a dress would be better. More appropriate for the aesthetic." There was that word again. I told her I'd think about it. I didn't tell her that I'd already decided to wear my mess dress, that I'd had it tailored, that I'd planned to honor her day the way I honored every formal occasion, with the pride of service. I didn't tell her that her request felt like being erased. The day before the wedding, I drove 6 hours to the venue, a restored estate with manicured gardens and a stone terrace overlooking a lake. I checked into the hotel, pressed my uniform, polished my shoes. I practiced smiling in the mirror. I told myself it would be fine. I told myself she was still my sister. I told myself I could survive one day of feeling invisible if it made her happy. I was wrong. The wedding was at 1500 hours on a Saturday in June. The sky was clear, the gardens were perfect, the guests arrived in expensive cars and designer dresses. I arrived in my Air Force mess dress, dark blue jacket, crisp white shirt, ribbons aligned, shoes reflecting the afternoon sun. I saw Lila near the entrance, talking to the wedding coordinator. She looked beautiful in a way that seemed engineered, hair swept into an intricate updo, makeup professionally applied, dress fitted and beaded and probably worth more than my car. When she saw me, her smile froze. She excused herself from the coordinator and walked over, heels clicking on the stone pathway. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe, and I watched her expression shift from surprise to something sharper. "You wore the uniform," she said. "Yes. I asked you not to. You suggested I consider a dress." I considered it. Her jaw tightened. She glanced around, checking if anyone was watching, then lowered her voice. "Elise, please. This day is really important to me." "I know. Then why are you making it difficult?" I felt the words like a slap. "I'm not making anything difficult. I'm attending my sister's wedding in formal military attire, which is appropriate and respectful. It's going to draw attention." "I'm not trying to draw attention." "Well, you are." She crossed her arms, her voice dropping to a hiss. "Daniel's father is a retired general. People are going to compare." They're going to judge. Let them, I said quietly. She stared at me, and for a moment I thought she might cry or yell or say something that would crack the careful facade she'd built. Instead, she just shook her head. Stay out of the photos, she said. I blinked. What? The formal photos. The family shots. Just stay out of them. Please. Lila, you don't fit in, she said, the words tumbling out rushed and raw. Not with his family, not with this. You just don't fit in, okay? The silence that followed felt longer than it was. I could hear music starting inside, guests laughing, someone calling Lila's name from across the garden. Okay, I said. She looked almost relieved. Thank you. She walked away, and I stood there alone on the stone path, feeling the weight of the ribbons on my chest and the emptiness in my stomach. An usher appeared a few minutes later, young and uncomfortable, holding a clipboard. Captain Rowan? Yes. I'll show you to your seat. He led me inside, past tables decorated with white roses and gold-rimmed china, past guests who glanced at my uniform with curiosity or respect, past the family tables near the front where Lila's name cards were arranged in careful calligraphy. He led me to a small table in the back corner, near the kitchen doors and the hallway to the restrooms. 2 other people were already seated there, an elderly cousin I'd met once and someone's coworker who looked equally confused about the placement. Here you are, the usher said, apologetic. I sat down. The chair faced away from the ceremony space. I could hear the music but couldn't see the altar. I looked around at the other guests, Lila's friends from yoga, Daniel's colleagues in tailored suits, his family in the front rows, polished and poised, and exactly the kind of people she wanted to impress. And then I saw him. Major General Thomas Hart stood near the entrance, talking to a waiter. He was in his early 60s, tall and straight-backed, with silver hair and the kind of presence that made people stand a little straighter when he entered a room. He wore a dark suit, no uniform, but the authority was unmistakable. He scanned the room with the practiced eye of someone used to assessing situations quickly. His gaze passed over me, then returned, lingering on the uniform, the insignia, the captain's bars on my shoulders. He walked over. Captain, he said, his voice calm and courteous. I stood. Sir. Thomas Hart, he said, extending his hand. Daniel's father. Elise Rowan, sir. Lila's sister. His handshake was firm. He glanced at the table, then back at me. You're seated here? Yes, sir. He frowned slightly, a crease forming between his eyebrows. This is the family table? No, sir. That's up front. His frown deepened. He looked toward the front of the room, then back at me. You're the bride's sister. Yes, sir. And you're an Air Force captain. Yes, sir. He studied me for a long moment, and I had the sudden uncomfortable feeling of being evaluated, not in a hostile way, but in the thorough, meticulous way of someone who'd spent decades making decisions about people. This doesn't seem right, he said. I didn't respond. I didn't want to embarrass Lila. I didn't want to cause a scene. Excuse me, he said, and walked away. I sat back down, heart pounding, unsure what had just happened. The ceremony began. I couldn't see it, but I could hear the music, the officiant's voice, the murmur of guests standing and sitting. I imagined Lila walking down the aisle, beautiful and nervous, holding on to the version of herself she'd constructed for this day. I wondered if she felt happy or just relieved. When the ceremony ended, guests moved into the reception space. Dinner was served, roasted chicken, asparagus, a wine I didn't drink because I was driving back to base that night. The elderly cousin asked me polite questions about the Air Force. The coworker scrolled through his phone. I watched Lila from across the room. She was radiant, laughing, dancing with Daniel, posing for photos with his family. She never looked my way. And then General Hart stood up. The room didn't go silent immediately, but a hush spread outward from his table like ripples on water. He stood with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud, and people noticed. Excuse me, he said, his voice carrying across the room. I need to address something. Daniel looked nervous. Lila's smile faltered. The photographer lowered his camera. General Hart looked directly at my table in the back corner. Captain Rowan, he said. Would you come here, please? Every head in the room turned toward me. I stood slowly, unsure what was happening, and walked toward the front. My shoes echoed on the hardwood floor. I could feel every eye on me, every whispered question. When I reached his table, General Hart gestured to his own chair. "I will not eat," he said, his voice calm but unyielding, until the bride's sister is seated with her family. The room went utterly still. "Sir," I said quietly, "that's not necessary." "It is," he said. He pulled out his chair. "Please." Lila's face had gone pale. Daniel looked between his father and his new wife, caught between loyalty and confusion. "Dad," Daniel started, but General Hart raised a hand. "This is a military officer," he said. "This is your wife's sister. She belongs at the family table." I didn't want to sit down. I wanted to disappear, to avoid the confrontation, to let Lila have her perfect day without complications. But General Hart stood there, waiting, immovable, and I realized he wasn't going to back down. I sat. The chair was still warm from where he'd been sitting. I could smell the faint scent of his cologne, feel the weight of the room's attention pressing down on me like a physical thing. Lila's hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table, knuckles white, and stared at the centerpiece like it held answers. Daniel reached for her, but she pulled away. "I need a minute," she whispered, and stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. She walked out of the reception hall, heels clicking, and the guests began murmuring. The spell broke. People turned back to their conversations, but the energy had shifted, awkward, tense, everyone pretending not to have witnessed what had just happened. General Hart remained standing. He addressed the room with the same calm authority. "Please continue enjoying your evening," he said, and then he walked out after Lila. I sat alone at the family table, surrounded by empty chairs and half-eaten dinners, feeling like I'd just detonated a bomb I hadn't meant to carry. Claire Hart, Daniel's mother, leaned over from her seat beside me. She was elegant, composed, the kind of woman who could make silence feel like a conversation. "I apologize for the disruption," she said quietly. "It's not your fault," I said. "No," she agreed. "It's not." She said it kindly, but the implication was clear. Jenna appeared at my elbow a few minutes later. She was one of the bridesmaids, wearing a pale pink dress and an expression of barely concealed horror. "Elise, I'm so sorry." "For what?" "I didn't know she'd put you back there." "I swear I didn't know until yesterday, and I told her it was wrong, but she said it was too late to change the seating chart." I looked at her. She knew where I'd be sitting. Jenna nodded miserably. "She insisted. She said you'd understand." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something closer to resignation. The realization that this wasn't a mistake or an oversight. It was a choice. Lila had chosen to hide me, to minimize me, to erase me from the story she was telling about herself. And I'd let her do it for years. "Thank you for telling me," I said. Jenna squeezed my hand and disappeared back into the crowd. I stood up. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't interested in watching the rest of the reception unfold. I walked outside into the garden, where the evening air was cool and the sound of music faded into something distant and manageable. I found a bench near the rose bushes and sat down. I pulled out my phone, thought about calling someone, then put it away. There was no one to call. No one who would understand the specific shape of this hurt. Except maybe one person. I texted Major Serena Cho, a colleague from my squadron. We deployed together twice, shared countless late-night conversations in operations tents and on tarmacs, become the kind of friends who didn't need explanations. "Wedding is a disaster," I typed. Sister seated me by the bathrooms. Her father-in-law made a scene. Her response came a minute later. "You've led airmen through combat deployments. You can handle your sister's insecurity." I smiled despite myself. Serena had a way of cutting through noise. "Still hurts," I wrote back. "Of course it does," she replied. "She's your sister. But pain doesn't mean you're weak. It means you cared. Now you get to decide if she deserves that care moving forward." I read the message 3 times. Then I stood up, smoothed my uniform, and walked back inside. Lila was at the bar, talking to Daniel in low, urgent tones. He looked exhausted. She looked furious. When she saw me, She broke away from him and walked over, her face flushed and tear-streaked. "Are you happy now?" she said. "No. You embarrass me in front of everyone." "I didn't do anything," I said quietly. "I sat where you told me to sit. I stayed out of the photos like you asked. But you wore the uniform." "Yes. Why? Why couldn't you just wear a dress and let this day be about me?" I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize anymore. Or maybe someone I'd always seen but had refused to name. "Lila," I said, "I've given you money I didn't have. I've covered for you, supported you, shown up for you over and over. I wore this uniform because it's who I am. And if that's embarrassing to you, then the problem isn't the uniform." Her face crumpled. She looked like she wanted to argue, to deflect, to make this my fault the way she'd made everything my fault for years. But she didn't. She just stood there, crying, while guests pretended not to watch. "I can't do this right now," she said finally. "Then don't," I said. I walked past her, past Daniel, past the bridesmaids and groomsmen and well-dressed guests who'd witnessed the whole thing. I walked out to my car, got in, and drove away from the estate, from the perfect gardens and the curated aesthetic and the version of family that required me to be smaller. I drove for 2 hours before I stopped at a rest area and called Serena. "I left," I said when she answered. "Good. She's going to be furious. Let her." I leaned my head against the steering wheel. "I feel like I just burned down a bridge." "Maybe," Serena said. "Or maybe you just stopped setting yourself on fire to keep it warm." I drove the rest of the way back to base in silence, windows down, night air rushing in. When I finally pulled into the parking lot outside my quarters, it was past midnight. I sat in the car for a long time, still in my uniform, and thought about the look on General Hart's face when he'd stood up. He hadn't done it to embarrass Lila. He'd done it because he recognized disrespect when he saw it, and he refused to participate. I realized I'd spent years participating in my own diminishment, telling myself it was kindness, telling myself it was love. I went inside, hung up my uniform, and fell asleep still wearing my t-shirt and socks, too tired to do anything else. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter. The days after the wedding were quiet. I returned to my duties on base, morning briefs, flight training schedules, the steady rhythm of military life that had always felt more like home than any house I'd grown up in. Lila didn't call. I didn't call her either. I told myself I was giving her space, giving us both time to cool down. But the truth was simpler. I didn't know what to say. Every conversation we'd had for years had been built on a foundation of me bending, adjusting, making room for her feelings while mine went unspoken. I didn't know how to talk to her without doing that. A week after the wedding, Mom called. Her voice was careful, neutral, the tone she used when she was trying not to take sides. "Lila told me what happened," she said. "I'm sure she did. She's upset." "I know." There was a pause. I could hear Mom shifting the phone, the sound of her kitchen in the background, dishes clattering, the hum of the refrigerator. Familiar sounds from a place that hadn't felt like home in a long time. "She says you caused a scene," Mom said. "General Hart caused the scene. I just sat where he told me to sit. She says you embarrassed her." "I wore my uniform to a formal event." "That's not embarrassing. That's appropriate." Mom sighed. "Elise, you know how she is. She wanted everything to be perfect. And I was the imperfection." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The silence stretched between us, heavy with years of unspoken dynamics. Mom had always been the peacekeeper, the mediator, the one who smoothed over conflicts and pretended everything was fine. She'd done it when Dad left. She'd done it when Lila dropped out of school. She'd done it every time I sent money or covered rent or showed up when no one else did. "I love you both," Mom said finally. "I just want you to be okay." "I am okay," I said. "I'm just done pretending." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing important, and then she said she had to go. I hung up and stared at my phone, waiting for the guilt to come. It didn't. Just a strange, clear sense of finality. 2 weeks later, I got a text from Jenna. "How are you holding up?" "Fine," I wrote back. "How's Lila?" "Honestly? Not great. The honeymoon was tense. Daniel's parents have been distant. I think the whole thing really got to her." I didn't respond right away. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, to think she deserved the discomfort. But mostly I just felt tired. I hope she's okay, I typed eventually. She misses you, Jenna wrote. She won't admit it, but she does. I put my phone down and went for a run. 6 miles at a pace that burned, sweat soaking through my shirt, lungs aching. When I got back to my quarters, I felt clean in a way that had nothing to do with the shower I took afterward. I started noticing things about my life that had been there all along, but that I'd stopped paying attention to. The friendships I'd built with other officers, people who understood the demands of service and didn't resent them. The satisfaction of leading a squadron, of making decisions that mattered, of earning respect through competence rather than compliance. I'd spent so much time managing Lila's needs that I'd forgotten what it felt like to focus on my own. Serena invited me to dinner one night at her place off base. Her partner cooked, and we sat on their back porch drinking beer and talking about everything except family drama. It felt normal, easy, uncomplicated. You seem different, Serena said at one point. How? Lighter. Like you put something down. I thought about that. Maybe I did. A month after the wedding, I got promoted to major. The ceremony was small, held in a conference room on base with my squadron and a few senior officers in attendance. Serena pinned on my new insignia. I felt proud in a way that was quiet and solid, unconnected to anyone's approval but my own. Mom came to the ceremony. Lila didn't. Afterward, Mom and I had lunch at a diner near the base. She ordered a salad she didn't finish. I ordered a burger I did. I'm proud of you, she said. Thank you. Your sister is too. She just doesn't know how to say it. I set down my burger. Mom, I need you to stop doing that. Doing what? Making excuses for her. Translating her feelings for her. Acting like I'm supposed to understand what she won't say. Mom looked uncomfortable. She folded her napkin into smaller and smaller squares, not meeting my eyes. I'm just trying to keep the peace. I know. But the peace you're keeping isn't real. It's just silence. She didn't argue. She just nodded, and I saw something shift in her expression, recognition, maybe, or resignation. We finished lunch, and I drove her back to her hotel. Before she got out of the car, she hugged me tight. I love you, she said. I love you too. Give her time, she said. She'll come around. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure I wanted her to. 3 months passed. I deployed to Qatar for a 6-week training mission. The work was demanding, the heat was relentless, and I loved every minute of it. I was good at this, leading, planning, executing. I belonged here in a way I'd never belonged at Lila's wedding. I came back to find a voicemail from her. Hey, her voice said, uncertain and small. It's me. I wanted to check in. See how you're doing. Call me back if you want. I listened to it 3 times before I deleted it. I wasn't ready. But something about hearing her voice made me realize I wasn't angry anymore either. Just cautious. Like approaching a door I used to walk through without thinking, now testing the handle to see if it would hold my weight. I didn't call her back that day. Or the next. But I didn't block her number either. I was learning that boundaries weren't walls. They were doors I got to decide when to open. And I wasn't in a hurry. For months after the wedding, Lila sent an email. Not a text, not a voicemail, an email, carefully written, with proper paragraphs and a subject line that said, only, I'm sorry. I read it at my desk on base during a rare quiet morning before flight operations began. The email was long. Longer than anything she'd ever written to me. She apologized for the seating chart, for the photos, for the way she'd treated me. She said she'd been so focused on impressing Daniel's family that she'd lost sight of what actually mattered. She said she knew I'd been carrying her for years and she'd never acknowledged it. She said therapy was helping her see patterns she'd been blind to. It was the most honest she'd ever been with me. I read it twice, then closed my laptop and went to brief my flight crews. That evening, I wrote back. Not a long email, just a few lines. I appreciate the apology. I'm not ready to go back to how things were, but I'm open to figuring out something different. Her response came within an hour. That's fair. I'll take it. We didn't talk on the phone for another month. When we finally did, the conversation was awkward, stilted, like 2 people learning a language neither of them spoke fluently. She asked about work. I asked about her marriage. We avoided the wedding entirely. It wasn't comfortable, but it was real. Slowly, carefully, we started rebuilding. Not the relationship we'd had before. That was gone, and I didn't want it back. Something smaller, more honest, with clearer edges. She stopped asking for money. I stopped offering advice she didn't request. We talked less frequently but more truthfully. 6 months after the wedding, she called me on a Saturday afternoon. "I saw General Hart at a charity event last week," she said. "How was that?" "Uncomfortable." He was polite. "Claire was warm, actually. She asked about you." "What did you tell her?" "That you're doing well. That we're working on things." She paused. "He said something to me before he left." "What?" "He said, your sister is an impressive officer. You should be proud." And I realized. I am. I just didn't know how to show it without feeling like I was admitting I'd failed. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just listened. "I'm sorry," she said again. "For all of it. For making you feel like you didn't matter." "I know. Do you forgive me?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. "I'm getting there," I said. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean going back to the way things were. "I know," she said quietly. "I don't want to go back either." We talked for another 20 minutes about nothing important, weather, work, a movie she'd watched. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Not certainty, not comfort, just the quiet possibility that we might find a way forward that didn't require me to shrink. A year after the wedding, I attended a family gathering for Mom's birthday. Lila and Daniel were there. So was I. We sat at the same table, passed dishes, made small talk. It wasn't warm, but it wasn't hostile either. General Hart sent me a card for my promotion to major. Inside, he'd written, "Leadership is not about rank. It's about character. You have both." Tom Hart. I kept the card in my desk drawer. Lila and I found a rhythm. We talked every few weeks. We sent occasional texts. We showed up for the important things: Mom's birthday, holidays, milestones, but we didn't pretend to be closer than we were. She was in therapy. I was too, as it turned out. My therapist helped me see how much of my identity had been wrapped up in fixing other people's problems, and how exhausting that was. I started saying no more often. I started prioritizing my own needs without guilt. I started building a life that felt like mine, not a reaction to someone else's expectations. I dated someone for a few months, a civil engineer who worked on base contracts. It didn't last, but it was good while it did. I remembered what it felt like to be wanted for who I was, not what I could provide. I got selected for lieutenant colonel. The ceremony was larger this time, held in a hangar with my entire wing in attendance. Lila came. She sat in the third row, next to Mom, and when they pinned on my oak leaves, she cried. Afterward, she hugged me. "I'm proud of you," she said, and this time I believed her. "Thank you." "I mean it," she said. "I know I didn't show it before. But I see you now. I see what you've built." I hugged her back, and it felt different. Not like before, when I'd carried her weight along with my own. Just two people, imperfect and complicated, trying to figure out how to love each other without one of us disappearing. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. That night, I sat in my quarters and looked at the oak leaves on my collar. I thought about the girl I'd been at 23, standing in her blues at commissioning, desperate to make everyone proud. I thought about the woman I'd become, someone who'd learned that respect begins with respecting yourself, that boundaries aren't cruelty, that love doesn't require erasure. I thought about the wedding, the moment Lila had hissed at me to stay out of the photos. The moment General Hart had stood up and said, "I will not eat until she is seated with her family." I'd thought he was defending me. And he was. But he was also teaching Lila something she'd needed to learn, that dignity isn't negotiable, that respect isn't earned through compliance, that some things matter more than appearances. It had taken a year, but I think she finally understood. I picked up my phone and sent her a text. "Thank you for coming today." Her response came immediately. "Thank you for letting me." I put my phone down and looked out the window at the base lights glowing in the distance. Somewhere out there, people were working night shifts, running drills, preparing for missions. My people. My squadron. My life. I'd spent years trying to fit into spaces that were never meant for me. I'd shrunk myself, dimmed my accomplishments, apologized for taking up room. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. I'd earned every rank, every ribbon, every ounce of respect I'd been given. I'd led airmen through deployments, made decisions that saved lives, built a career I was proud of. And if that made me too much for some people, too intense, too serious, too square, that was fine. I didn't need to fit into someone else's aesthetic. I'd built my own. I turned off the light and went to bed, mess dress hanging in the closet, oak leaves gleaming on the collar, and for the first time in years, I slept without carrying anyone else's weight. I woke up the next morning feeling clear and grounded. The kind of morning where everything clicks into place. The coffee tastes better, the run feels easier, the uniform sits exactly right on your shoulders. I reported to my squadron at 0700 hours. My first meeting was with Captain Reyes, one of my flight commanders, who'd been dealing with a maintenance issue on 3 of our aircraft. We solved it in 20 minutes. The second meeting was with a young second lieutenant who was struggling with confidence. I spent an hour with her, sharing stories from my early career, reminding her that every officer feels lost at first. You'll figure it out, I told her. And when you do, you'll help the next person who feels exactly like you do right now. She left looking steadier. At lunch, Serena dropped by my office with takeout. We ate at my desk, talking about an upcoming inspection and her plans to propose to her partner. Life was good. Complicated, demanding, full of challenges, but good. How are things with your sister? Serena asked between bites of her sandwich. Better, I said. Not perfect, but better. That's all you can ask for. I nodded. It was true. I'd stopped expecting perfection from Lila, from our relationship, from myself. I'd started accepting progress instead. That evening, I got a call from General Hart. I almost didn't answer. I still wasn't entirely comfortable with the attention he'd brought to the situation, but something made me pick up. Lieutenant Colonel Rowan, he said. His voice was warm, professional. I hope I'm not interrupting. Not at all, sir. I wanted to congratulate you on your promotion. I heard it came through. Well deserved. Thank you, sir. There was a pause. Then he said, I also wanted to apologize if my actions at the wedding caused you any discomfort. That wasn't my intention. I was surprised. Sir, you don't need to apologize. You were standing up for what was right. Perhaps, he said. But I'm aware that family situations are delicate. I didn't want to make things harder for you. You didn't, sir. If anything, you made them clearer. He seemed to consider that. Your sister is fortunate to have you, he said. I hope she knows that now. I think she's learning. Good. He paused again. If you're ever in the area, Claire and I would be happy to have you for dinner. Daniel speaks highly of you. We'd like to know you better. I smiled despite myself. I'd like that, sir. Thank you. We talked for a few more minutes about my new duties, his retirement projects, the state of the military. When we hung up, I felt something settle, a sense that the whole messy situation had led to something unexpected and good. The next few months passed in a steady rhythm. I threw myself into my work, mentoring junior officers, leading training exercises, preparing my squadron for deployment rotations. I felt competent, valued, necessary in the best possible way. Lila and I continued our careful rebuild. We had dinner once when I visited Mom, and it was easier than I'd expected. She asked thoughtful questions about my career. I asked about her life without prying. Daniel joined us and was gracious, apologizing quietly for not understanding the situation better during the wedding. I should have said something, he admitted. I knew the seating wasn't right. I just didn't want to upset Lila. It's okay, I said, and meant it. It's not, he said. But I'm glad things are getting better. They were. Slowly, incrementally, things were getting better. A year and a half after the wedding, Lila called me on a Wednesday afternoon. I'm pregnant, she said, her voice a mix of excitement and terror. Congratulations, I said, surprised by how genuinely happy I felt. Thank you. I'm scared out of my mind. You'll be fine. I don't know. What if I mess it up? What if I'm as bad at being a mom as I was at being a sister? I took a breath. Lila, you weren't bad at being a sister. You were young and selfish and scared. But you're working on it. And that's what matters. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think, would you want to be the godmother? I felt my throat tighten. Are you sure? I'm sure. I want my kid to know you. To see what strength looks like. To understand that family doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. I said yes. When her daughter was born, Nora Claire Hart, 8 pounds, healthy and loud, I flew out to meet her. I held her in the hospital room while Lila slept and Daniel made coffee runs, and I felt something shift inside me. Not forgiveness, exactly. More like release. The hurt I'd carried for so long loosened its grip, and in its place was something softer. Lila woke up and saw me holding Nora. She looks like you, she said sleepily. She looks like you, I corrected. Let's hope she has your sense, Lila said. And then, quieter, thank you for being here. Of course. Over the next year, I visited when I could. I sent gifts. I video called to watch Nora grow. Lila was a nervous mother, constantly second-guessing herself, but she was also tender and attentive in ways I hadn't expected. Daniel's parents doted on Nora. General Hart sent me photos sometimes, Nora in tiny overalls, Nora laughing, Nora reaching for a toy. He'd include messages like, "She has your determination already." I didn't know if that was true, but I appreciated the thought. Life continued. I deployed twice more. I mentored new officers. I dated occasionally, nothing serious, but I was learning what I wanted in a partner, someone who respected my work, who didn't need me to be smaller, who saw me as whole. Lila and I found our balance. We weren't best friends. We didn't talk every day. But we were sisters in a way that felt honest and sustainable. We showed up for each other when it mattered, and we gave each other space when it didn't. 2 years after Nora was born, I got selected for colonel. The promotion was competitive, and I'd worked for it, years of strong evaluations, successful commands, deployments that had tested and proven my leadership. The ceremony was held at a base chapel, formal and moving. My entire wing attended. Mom sat in the front row, beaming. Lila sat beside her, holding Nora, who was squirming and babbling through the whole thing. General Hart pinned on my eagles. It was tradition to have a senior officer do it, and when I'd asked him, he'd accepted without hesitation. "I'm honored," he'd said. Standing there in front of my colleagues, my family, my people, I felt something I'd never quite felt before, a sense of completeness. Not because I'd proven anything to anyone, but because I'd finally proven it to myself. After the ceremony, there was a reception. People congratulated me, shook my hand, told stories about missions we'd flown together. Lila stayed close, juggling Nora and a plate of cookies, smiling at strangers who complimented her daughter. At one point, she pulled me aside. "I'm really proud of you," she said. "I know." "No, I mean," she struggled to find words. "I used to be jealous. Of your career, your confidence, the way people respected you. I wanted what you had, but I didn't want to do the work to earn it. And I punished you for that." "Lila, let me finish." She adjusted Nora on her hip. That day at the wedding, when General Hart stood up, I was so angry. I thought he was humiliating me on purpose. But he wasn't. He was showing me what respect actually looks like. And I've been thinking about that ever since. I waited. "I don't want Nora to grow up like I did," she said. Afraid of other people's strength. Resentful of women who are smarter or braver or more accomplished. I want her to see what you've built and know that it's possible. That it's good. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. "She'll be lucky to have you as a mom." "I hope so." Lila smiled, tired but genuine. "And she'll be even luckier to have you as a godmother." We stood there for a moment, watching the reception unfold around us, officers in dress blues, family members taking photos, Nora reaching for my new eagles with chubby, curious hands. "Can she touch them?" Lila asked. "Of course." I leaned down and Nora grabbed the eagle on my collar, her tiny fingers surprisingly strong. She laughed, delighted, and I laughed too. It wasn't the ending I'd imagined all those years ago, standing alone at the back of Lila's wedding, feeling invisible and small. But it was better. Because it was real. 12 years later, I'm standing in my office at the Pentagon, looking out at the Potomac River while my aide reviews my schedule for the day. The nameplate on my desk reads Brigadier General Elise Rowan, and some mornings I still catch myself staring at it, not quite believing the single star that now sits on each shoulder. Ma'am, you have the Joint Chiefs briefing at 0900, followed by the budget review at 1100. Lunch is with Senator Kirkland's Defense Committee at 12:30, and then you're scheduled to speak at the Air Force Academy graduation at 1700 hours. Thank you, Captain Mills, I say, turning from the window. What time do I need to leave for Colorado? Aircraft departs Andrews at 1400 hours, ma'am. I nod, mentally reviewing the speech I've been working on for weeks. Speaking to graduating cadets always feels important, weighty in a way that most briefings don't. These are the young officers who'll inherit the force I've spent my career building and protecting. I want to give them something real, something that will matter when they're facing their own challenges years from now. My phone buzzes. A text from Lila. Nora wants to know if you're still coming to her recital next weekend. She's very insistent. I smile and type back, wouldn't miss it. Tell her I'll be the one in the front row trying not to cry. She says you always cry at her recitals. She's not wrong. Nora is 14 now, all long limbs and sharp observations, passionate about environmental science and classical piano. She's nothing like Lila was at that age, thank God, and everything I'd hoped she might become. Smart, confident, kind in ways that feel effortless rather than performed. She calls me Aunt Elise, or sometimes just General, depending on her mood, and she's one of the few people on Earth who can make me laugh until my sides hurt. Last month, she interviewed me for a school project on women in leadership. She'd asked thoughtful questions about obstacles I'd faced, decisions I'd made, moments I'd doubted myself. At the end, she'd looked at me seriously and said, I think I want to do something important with my life too. Like you. I'd told her she could do anything she wanted, that she didn't need to join the military to be important, that importance came in many forms. She'd nodded, considering this, then said, but you're happy, right? With what you chose? Yes, I'd said without hesitation. I'm happy. And I was. I am. Not in some simple, uncomplicated way. Life at this level is demanding, exhausting, full of impossible choices and sleepless nights. But it's mine. Every challenge, every success, every failure I've learned from. I built this life deliberately, brick by brick, and I've never once regretted it. The briefing with the Joint Chiefs goes smoothly. We're discussing modernization strategies, budget allocations, personnel retention issues. I present my wing's data, answer questions, push back when I need to. There was a time when rooms like this intimidated me, full of stars and decades of experience, men mostly, though that's slowly changing. Now I just see colleagues. People doing difficult jobs, trying to make good decisions with imperfect information. Afterward, General Marcus Chin, an Army 3-star I've worked with on several joint operations, pulls me aside. Strong presentation, Elise. The retention data especially, that's the kind of analysis we need. Thank you, sir. I heard a rumor, he says, lowering his voice slightly, about the next round of major command selections. I keep my expression neutral. Rumors are just rumors, sir. He smiles. True. But sometimes rumors have merit. Either way, you're doing exceptional work. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I thank him and head to my next meeting, mind spinning. Major Command. It's the next step, the level that determines whether you'll make it to the very top ranks or plateau where you are. I've been eligible for 2 years, passed over once already in favor of an officer with more joint operational experience. It stung, but I understood the logic. I'd focused on strengthening my joint credentials since then, taking assignments that broaden my resume, building relationships across services. If it happens this time, it happens. If not, I'll keep working, keep leading, keep pushing forward. I've learned that lesson well. My worth isn't determined by a single promotion or someone else's assessment. It's determined by the work I do every day, the officers I mentor, the decisions I make when no one's watching. The lunch with Senator Kirkland's committee is productive but exhausting. 3 hours of careful diplomacy, explaining complex strategic issues to civilians who have the power to fund or defund programs that keep our people safe. I'm good at this now, translating military necessity into political language, building coalitions, finding common ground. But it drains me in ways that operational commands never did. By the time I board the aircraft to Colorado, I'm ready for the relative quiet of flight. I use the time to review my speech one final time, making small adjustments, ensuring the tone is right. I want it to be honest without being discouraging, inspiring without being naive. The Air Force Academy graduation ceremony is held outdoors on a perfect May evening. Thousands of family members fill the stands, cameras ready, pride radiating from every section. The cadets sit in precise formations, faces young and serious, about to become second lieutenants and begin their own journeys. I'm introduced, walk to the podium, look out at all those expectant faces. 12 years ago, I was a lieutenant colonel standing at a wedding, realizing that the people who were supposed to value me most had made me invisible. I was seated at a table by the bathrooms, told to stay out of the photos, treated like an inconvenience. And in that moment, I had a choice: accept that treatment as normal or recognize it as unacceptable. I can see some cadets leaning forward, intrigued by where this is going. A decorated general, someone else's father, someone I just met, stood up and refused to tolerate that disrespect. Not because he knew me personally, but because he recognized that certain standards matter. That dignity isn't negotiable. That how we treat people, especially when it's inconvenient, reveals who we really are. I pause, letting that settle. You're about to enter a force that will challenge you in ways you cannot yet imagine. You'll face commanders who are brilliant and commanders who are merely competent. You'll serve with people who inspire you and people who disappoint you. You'll make decisions that keep you up at night, wondering if you chose correctly. The sun is starting to set, casting golden light across the stadium. What I learned that day at the wedding, and what I've learned in every year since, is that leadership begins with respecting yourself enough to set standards for how you're treated, for what you'll tolerate, for the kind of officer you want to become. It means being excellent at your job, but also being clear about your boundaries. It means giving generously to your team, but not martyring yourself in the process. It means understanding that you can be both strong and kind, both competent and vulnerable, both a leader and a person who needs support sometimes. I look out at the sea of blue uniforms, thinking about my own commissioning ceremony decades ago, how young I was, how much I didn't know. Some of you will rise quickly through the ranks. Others will take longer paths. Some of you will stay until retirement. Others will leave after your initial commitment and build extraordinary civilian careers. All of those paths are valid. What matters is that you choose them deliberately, with eyes open and standards intact. I'm nearing the end now. That general who stood up at the wedding? His name was Thomas Hart. He taught me something crucial without even meaning to, that real authority comes from character, not just rank. That the best leaders defend standards even when it's uncomfortable. That respect isn't something you demand, it's something you earn by giving it first, to yourself and to others. I pause one final time. You're about to receive your commissions and begin your service. My challenge to you is this: be excellent, but don't lose yourself in the pursuit of excellence. Set boundaries, but remain generous. Lead with integrity, but forgive yourself when you fall short. And never, ever let anyone seat you by the bathrooms, literally or figuratively, without recognizing it for what it is, a test of whether you know your own worth. The applause starts before I finish stepping back from the podium. I salute the cadets, and they salute back, and I feel that familiar tightness in my chest that comes from doing something that matters. Afterward, several cadets approach me during the reception. A young woman with determined eyes says, "General, thank you for that story. My family has been complicated about my decision to serve." It helps to hear that even generals deal with difficult personal situations. We're all just people, I tell her. The rank doesn't make us immune to life. It just gives us more practice at handling it with grace. Another cadet, a young man who reminds me of the lieutenants I mentored years ago, asks, "How do you know when to stand up for yourself versus when to let things go?" I consider this carefully. If it's about ego or pride, let it go. If it's about respect or standards or someone being genuinely mistreated, stand up. The difference becomes clearer with time. I fly back to DC that night, arriving at Andrews just before midnight. My driver takes me home to my small townhouse in Arlington, and I fall into bed, still wearing my service dress, too tired to change. The next morning, I'm back in the office by 06:30. There's an email waiting from General Hart. We've stayed in touch over the years, occasional messages, annual holiday cards, dinners when our schedules align. He and Claire have become something like family, in the way military families form through shared experience rather than blood. Watched your Academy speech online, his email reads. Outstanding. You've come a long way from that wedding. Proud to know you. Tom, I write back, thank you for standing up that day. It changed everything. Elise, his response comes within minutes. You changed everything. I just made it visible. The week passes in its usual blur of meetings, briefings, decisions. On Friday evening, I drive out to Lila's house in Virginia, a comfortable suburban home with a garden Nora tends obsessively and a living room full of photos that now include me. Lila meets me at the door. She's 46 now, softer around the edges in all the best ways. Motherhood and therapy and time have transformed her into someone I genuinely enjoy spending time with. We're not as close as some sisters, but we're honest with each other, and that matters more. She's been practicing for 3 hours, Lila says, gesturing toward the sound of piano coming from the den. I think she's more nervous about you being there than about the actual recital. No pressure, I say dryly. Nora appears in the hallway, hair in a messy bun, wearing sweatpants and an old Air Force t-shirt I gave her years ago. And Elise. You're early. I'm exactly on time. Early for you, she says, grinning. She's gotten my sense of humor, my directness, my tendency to show up 5 minutes before scheduled. Do you want to hear the piece I'm playing? Absolutely. I follow her to the piano while Lila disappears into the kitchen. Nora sits down and begins playing, something classical and complex that I don't recognize, but that sounds beautiful. I watch her fingers move across the keys, her face concentrated and peaceful, and I think about how different this life is from the one I imagined at her age. When she finishes, I applaud. That's gorgeous, Nora. You're going to be amazing tomorrow. Do you think Grandpa Tom will come? She asks. She calls General Hart Grandpa Tom because technically he's her grandfather through marriage, but also because she adores him and he dotes on her shamelessly. I know he will. He wouldn't miss it. Good. She closes the piano carefully. Can I ask you something? Always. Mom told me about her wedding. About what happened with you. I glance toward the kitchen, wondering how much Lila shared. What did she tell you? That she treated you badly because she was insecure. That Grandpa Tom stood up for you. That it took her a long time to apologize and even longer to really understand why it was wrong. Nora looks at me seriously. She said it was one of the worst things she's ever done. I sit down on the piano bench beside her. Your mom was young and scared and trying to be someone she thought other people wanted her to be. We all make mistakes like that. Do you forgive her? Yes. Did it take a long time? I think about how to answer honestly. It took as long as it needed to. Forgiveness isn't instant, and it doesn't erase what happened. But your mom did the work to change, and I did the work to let her back in carefully. And now we have something better than what we had before. Nora nods, processing this. I hope I never make you feel like that. You won't, I say firmly. You're not your mom at her worst. You're you at your best. She hugs me then, fierce and quick, and I hold on maybe a second longer than necessary. Dinner is comfortable. Chicken, salad, bread Lila baked herself. Daniel joins us after work, still in his suit, looking tired but content. He's aged well, runs his own consulting firm now, coaches Nora's debate team. He's been good for Lila, patient and steady, willing to call her out when she needs it and support her when she's struggling. How's the Pentagon treating you? He asks. Like I work at the Pentagon, I say. Lots of meetings, lots of politics, occasional actual military strategy. He laughs. Dad says you're likely for major command. Your dad has access to information I don't. He also has opinions, Daniel says. And his opinion is that you're overqualified for anything they're likely to offer you. Lila looks up from her plate. What does major command mean exactly? It means leading a large, critical organization, I explain. A base, a center, a significant operational command. It's competitive, and it's where you prove whether you can handle star-level responsibility. You can handle it, Nora says with the absolute certainty of youth. Thanks, kiddo. After dinner, Lila and I clean up while Daniel helps Nora with homework. We work in comfortable silence for a few minutes before Lila says, "Thank you." For what? For being here. For not giving up on us even when I gave you every reason to. I dry a plate carefully. You're my sister. I was never going to completely give up. But you set boundaries. You made me work for it. She scrubs at a pot, not looking at me. That was the right thing to do, even though I hated it at the time. It was the right thing for both of us. She nods. I think about that wedding a lot. About how I treated you. It makes me sick sometimes remembering. Don't make yourself sick over it. Just keep being better. I'm trying. She finally looks at me. Nora asked me the other day what I'm most proud of in my life. I told her it was being her mom. But the second thing? It was rebuilding my relationship with you. Doing the work to deserve your trust again. I feel my throat tighten. You've done that, Lila. You really have. We finish the dishes, and I stay for another hour, playing a board game with Nora that she wins easily. When I finally leave, Lila walks me to my car. I'll see you tomorrow at the recital, I say. Tom and Claire are coming too. And Mom. It'll be a full house. Good. Nora deserves a full house. I drive back to Arlington thinking about family, about forgiveness, about how the relationships we break can sometimes be rebuilt stronger than they were before, if everyone's willing to do the work. The recital is lovely. Nora plays beautifully. General Hart sits beside me in the audience, and at one point he leans over and whispers, "She has your focus." "She has her own everything," I whisper back. Afterward, we all go out for ice cream, me, Lila, Daniel, Nora, Mom, Tom, and Claire. We crowd into a booth meant for 6, laughing and talking over each other, and I realize this is what I fought for all those years ago. Not perfection. Not the family I'd imagined. Just this. Honest relationships, boundaries that protect rather than divide, love that doesn't require anyone to disappear. On Monday morning, I'm back in my office when my aide knocks on the door. "Ma'am, you have a call from the Chief of Staff's office." My heart rate picks up slightly, but I keep my voice neutral. "Put it through." The conversation lasts 10 minutes. When it's over, I sit very still at my desk, looking at the single star on my shoulder boards, thinking about the journey that brought me here. I've been selected for Major Command. In 6 months, I'll take over Air Combat Command's Warfare Center, one of the most prestigious commands available. It's the assignment that could lead to a second star, maybe more. It's everything I've worked toward for decades. I call Serena first. She screams so loud I have to hold the phone away from my ear. "I knew it. I told you they'd pick you." I call Mom second. She cries, says she's proud, asks if I'm eating enough. I call Lila third. She answers on the first ring, and I can hear Nora in the background asking who it is. "I got it," I tell her. "Major Command." "Oh my God, Elise. That's incredible. Tell Aunt Elise congratulations." Nora shouts. Nora says congratulations, Lila relays unnecessarily. I heard her. "When do you start?" 6 months. There'll be a change of command ceremony. You should all come. We'll be there, Lila says without hesitation. Front row. Taking up space. Being proud of you very loudly. I laugh. Perfect. That evening, I called General Hart. Claire answers, and I can hear him in the background asking who it is. "It's Elise," Claire says. And I suspect she is good news based on her tone. Tom takes the phone. "Well, Air Combat Command Warfare Center," I say. "Change of command in December." "Outstanding," he says, and I can hear the genuine pride in his voice. "Absolutely outstanding. You've earned this, Elise." "Thank you, sir. For everything. For that day at the wedding, for your mentorship over the years, for treating me like family." "You are family," he says simply. "You became family the moment I saw an officer being disrespected and decided it wasn't acceptable. Everything after that was just getting to know someone I already respected." We talk for a few more minutes about the assignment, the responsibilities, the challenges ahead. When we hang up, I sit in my quiet townhouse and let myself feel the full weight of the moment. I'm 47 years old. I'm a brigadier general in the United States Air Force. In 6 months, I'll take command of one of the most important warfare centers in the country. I've mentored dozens of officers who are now making their own marks on the force. I've deployed, led, served, grown. And I have a family, imperfect, complicated, but real. A sister who worked to earn my trust back. A niece who sees me as a role model. A mother who's learned to be proud without asking me to be smaller. Friends like Serena who've stood by me through everything. And Tom and Claire Hart, who saw something worth defending in me before I fully saw it in myself. I think about that day at the wedding, standing alone by the bathrooms, feeling invisible. I think about the years that followed, the hard conversations, the boundaries set, the relationships rebuilt. I think about choosing myself again and again until it became automatic. And I think about young Second Lieutenant Elise Rowan, standing at her commissioning ceremony 24 years ago, determined to serve, to succeed, to make everyone proud. I wish I could tell her that it would be harder than she imagined. That she'd face humiliation and betrayal from people she loved. That she'd have to learn to set boundaries and enforce them even when it hurt. But I'd also tell her that she'd survive it all. That she'd build a career and a life that exceeded every dream she had standing there in her blues. That she'd become someone who stood up for herself and for others, who led with integrity, who understood that real strength is knowing your worth and refusing to compromise it. I'd tell her that 12 years after the worst day, she'd be standing in her own home, wearing a general's star, about to take command of thousands of airmen, and that she'd have earned every single step of that journey. I'd tell her that it was all worth it. Every boundary set, every hard conversation, every moment of choosing herself over someone else's comfort. Worth it. I pour myself a glass of wine, change into comfortable clothes, and sit on my small balcony, looking out at the lights of DC. Somewhere out there, young lieutenants are learning to lead. Somewhere, cadets are dreaming about service. Somewhere, women are fighting to be seen, to be heard, to take up space without apology. And tomorrow, I'll get back to work. I'll mentor, lead, serve. I'll make hard decisions and live with their consequences. I'll continue building the force I want to be part of, creating space for the officers coming up behind me. But tonight, I just sit here and let myself be proud of the career I've built, of the relationships I've rebuilt, of the woman I've become, and of that young captain who stood up from a table by the bathrooms and decided, quietly but firmly, that she deserved better. She did. And she got it. Thanks for staying with me through this one. If you've ever had to redraw the lines in a relationship or realize someone only valued you when it benefited them, I'd love to hear how you handled it. Have you ever been sidelined by your own family? Did you ever reclaim your place the way you deserved? And if you were in my shoes at that wedding, what would you have done? Drop your story in the comments. Someone else might need to hear it. And if you want more real, grounded stories about boundaries, confidence, and choosing yourself, make sure to like, subscribe, and stick around. Your voice matters here.